Are you or is someone close to you currently in the fight against cancer? That question applies to just about all of us. Some statistics say that 1 in 2 of us will get cancer at some point in our lifetime. I'm your host, Alex Maiersperger. Today on the SAS Health Pulse podcast, we're diving in with a global leader known for his work in uncovering insights and delivering actions to get us to a healthier future. Joining us today is Richard Vonk, Vice President, Head of Oncology Statistics and Data Management at Bayer. Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Alex. I'm excited to be here.
So I've heard you speak before, and I've heard part of your talk about your personal purpose is seeing cancer be a manageable disease within your lifetime. Where are we in that battle today?
Yeah, Alex, a great question. Thank you. Ultimately, I would like to see cancer to be cured or even be prevented. That's a really hard task. Cancer death rates have declined over the last years, but there are still cancer types that where the death rate increases. So I hope we can come to a point where we can manage the disease. As you said, 1 in 2 people will be having cancer over their lifetime. But of course, if you look at least the Western population, almost everyone will be affected by cancer in a certain point in time. Either they have cancer themselves or the close relatives will have cancer. People around them will have cancer. And so I think if we can make this disease manageable in some way, yeah, that would be a great step forward. We're getting there.
You talk about the data side of it. There's been a huge increase in the volume and the diversity of data. How is the way that you're working with data changing?
Yeah, I think you're right, Alex. Originally, we've concentrated very much on clinical trials, getting the data from there. But we see more and more very diverse inputs of data, wearables, for example, that can help us understand how a patient is really doing real time. So I think that the way we get data is changing. We of course have partnerships, so we get different formats of data. We look at biomarker data, different formats again. But I think that the availability of data, the speed of this availability, and the way that we derive actions from the data will really be the determinant of the success of a drug development program, right? So getting the data in, making sure that you can derive actions from that data, that will make the real difference.
That's the part that matters, right? Is the insight, but also attached to the action.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
artificially,
so the extent,
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, the extent of the availability is of course changing very rapidly, right? And I think that the speed of availability or the availability itself, and again, the ability to derive actions from that will make the difference, right? And it's no use to just having the data. We need to be able to create an action based on that data. And that's the important part.
What is artificial intelligence's role in this? AI is certainly having its moment in the news. Is AI widely used in pharma today? And where might it be used even more in the future? Yeah,
I think had you asked me this question like 2 years ago, I would say, nah, really not really. But now it's slightly different, right? We see a huge uptake of AI in research, right? In detection of molecules, for example, and chemistry. We see a lot of AI in diagnostics. Right? For example, if you look at detection of breast cancer, AI can detect breast cancer so much earlier than any doctor could be. And that helps us, of course, if you think about making this disease more manageable, right? This will be a combination of early detection and treatment and prevention, of course. Right? So we see AI getting, really important in that area. However, if you look at the development part, the part that I play a role in, right, I don't see a lot going on there. But this is changing rapidly. We all hear about ChatGPT, for example, which is an NLP-based AI, for example, right? And we need to think about how are we going to use that in our work, right? And I think that these AI parts will significantly change the way we work and the tasks that we have, the roles that we have in clinical development. Yeah, it will be easier to, for example, program tables, right? The things that we need to do for regulatory submissions, right? That will be helpful, or write submissions, right? And I think that these tools can help with the operational aspects, not so much with the science aspects yet, but I may be mistaken in 2 years, right? I don't know.
That's the hard part about the future, right?
Yeah. difficult to say. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Managing and modeling across all of this diverse data and the different inputs coming in, what are your perspectives over the advantages and limitations of open source?
Oh, that's a really difficult question. I know that there are companies that are now betting on open source much more than on commercial software, and I look at it with great interest. I think that there's several challenges. If you look at commercial software, you need to have people that are trained to use this software. And if you look at university, for example, when we get new people, very few people are trained in commercial software. People use R and Python, right? And so the question is, okay, now they are coming into our company. What are they familiar with to use, right? There's a lot of discussion also about the costs of commercial versus open source software. I don't see that to be a big differentiator, right? Of course, if you use commercial software, you have to pay for that. What I see in open source is that there are other costs that are a little bit more hidden, right? So you need to take care of version control yourself, validation of the software, etc. So there's other costs that are incurred there. What I would like to see, if you think about the difference between open source software and commercial software, is a little bit more, trust between software providers and those using the software. So I actually think that working with solution providers, let's call them that, could be very, very helpful in our quest to cure cancer. They have a lot of experience in areas that I don't typically look at, right? And having an active exchange with software providers, with solution providers, can really help us move the needle. For me, never mind where the solution comes from. It's open source or it's commercial. We need some tools to do certain tasks, right? To do analysis, for example, or data management tasks, right? And I don't mind so much where it comes from. I think that the future is not open software or commercial software. It is the mix of it that counts.
Really insightful. Appreciate that. Statistics has somewhat of a controversial reputation in some circles. So there's a great debate about the value of certain types of statistics. Bayesian, for example, I know is a hot topic in many circles. How about statisticians? And so those doing the work, how are they viewed and used in your organization?
Yeah, I'm always surprised when people say statistics is controversial, right? For me, it's mathematics, right? So it should be controversial. You've interviewed, I think, Bruno Boulanger a while ago, right? He's a Bayesian, and I know him very well. And I remember when we first met, he said, "You will be a Bayesian," and I said, "Absolutely no way," right? But he was right in a way. So for me, the different, statistical methods are methods to answer questions, to calculate risks in a drug development program. And sometimes this is in a frequentist way, sometimes this is in a Bayesian way. I don't mind so much. So a lot of the discussions are in the statistics area, right? Between statisticians, I don't think that there's a lot of discussion outside of that area about the methodology. That's main thing is that we get answers to our question. Now, with respect to statisticians, a delicate question. Over time, I think pharma has realized that people doing statistics are as important as the statistics itself, right? So we are moving away from the writing protocols, SAPs, and doing basically tables, listings, and figures for a specific study. We are now integrated much more also in the strategic discussions. We see this at Bayer as well. So we are part, of course, of the project teams, right? And there's an increasing ask for strategic input. So what are we going to do next? What are the next steps? How would that pan out? That circles back to the data again, right? So if you look at why we use data, the data is typically used for submissions, right? So we try to get a drug developed, we show that it works, that it's safe, and then we submit it to the authorities. But now, using the methods that are available to us, we can also start thinking about, what happened in this study? What does that have, what are the consequences of this for our project, for the drug, or for our portfolio even, right? We can start thinking about simulating clinical trials to make sure what is going to happen to these patients, right? And this requires a lot of data that is, again, available in a timely manner, right? And I think that statisticians are the right people to manage that, to see, okay, what can we do with the data and what is it that we can't do with the data? So to me, if I say, ultimately, what does a statistician do? It's we calculate the risks. Yeah, we assess the risks of a portfolio, the risks of a study, a risk of, a false positive, if you want. We assess the risk. That's what we help you with.
I enjoyed that because it sounds like statisticians aren't just an input to the strategy, but are driving the strategy. And I think that's a big differentiator in many organizations of how they view statistics. Together, of course, with the rest of the team, right? So with the clinicians who ask the questions, with programmers, with data managers who make sure that we get the data in the right quality. Basically with a lot of people are involved in drug development. It's not only the statisticians, right? But I think they're a vital part of the team. Yes. There's a lot of promise throughout that sort of life cycle of automation that it's going to free up time. And so if resources can be deployed where you may not have had them before, potentially it gives more time to learn from the data that you do have, either that you already have or that you will have in the future. Do you see opportunity in that automation side, freeing up resources?
Absolutely. I think there's this ambiguity almost, right, between industrialization of work, right, the automation of, say, certain tasks, creating tables and listings and figures for clinical study reports, for example, and the requirement that we work in a more agile way. Right. And I think that if we can automate certain tasks, we have more time to look at the real science. Right. So it's at the end of a study, we have to do a lot. Right. So people are really busy with creating, the tables and figures and writing reports. There's very little time to really dive into the data to see what happened really in the study. And I think if we have more time to do that, we can say, okay, so now we have this study and hopefully it's positive. So the drug works. What were the drivers of the responses? What were the drivers of what happened to these patients? Are there subgroups of patients that were for whom the drug worked better, or even are there subgroups of patients that shouldn't be getting this drug? And I think that if we have more time to do that, if we free up time, we can be much more consequential even in the work that we're doing. So that's, I think, the big advantage. But we have to be careful, right? To me, it's like an 80-20 approach, right? 80% doing things basically in an industrial way, and then 20% doing ad hoc work and seeing, where is it that we need to look next? Yeah.
It sounds like there's some opportunity on the AI side, on the automation side, on the elevating statisticians to be driving and working alongside the strategy side.
Absolutely.
Because there are some real challenges that exist in just the health world today. There's an aging population, an aging world. In many cases, we're getting sicker or we're living with even more sickness. There's global travel. We have such an interconnected world. And so we're maybe spreading disease a little faster, or different diseases that are showing up in different places. So we're definitely seeing the need for faster, better, cheaper drugs across perhaps even a wider range of diseases. What's it going to take to get that done consistently?
Yeah, this question has a huge geopolitical aspect, and I will leave it to others to answer that. So I'll stick to the statistics. But I think that if we would be able to share data in an easier way, have access to more data, without violating data privacy. Of course, right? But if we can find ways to collaborate better, to share data, to develop new methods based on data, I think that's what it's going to take to move faster, right? It's all about the data that we get.
Well, it sounds like Bruno may have got you on the Bayesian side after all.
No, I'm still not a Bayesian. I would say I really like Bruno, but I do think that some of the question call for a Bayesian approach, right? So to me, it's just taking from the toolbox that we have, from the methodology that we have, from the knowledge that we have, take the right tools to answer the right question. Right. And I think that is what it's all about. Not about being a Bayesian or a frequentist, right? There's a place for everything.
Love that insight and really appreciate your thoughtful approach to elevating the role of statistics and statisticians, and love that you brought it back to the people. It's really the people who are interfacing with technology and, like you said, using the right tool for the right question to be able to drive a healthier future. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
So we've heard about AI, we've heard about automation, we've heard about statistics and the differing forms of it, and how that can help drive everything from drug discovery to automating parts of the drug discovery life cycle to development and production. So stay tuned as we continue to tackle some of healthcare and life sciences' biggest challenges together. We'd love to hear the ways that you're driving a healthier future. So leave a comment on YouTube down below, or reach out to us, the Health Pulse Podcast at SAS.com. We're rooting for you always.